This week, Jason Meller from Kolide is with us to discuss device management and trust. Then in the enterprise security news, security funding is properly back with our biggest funding week this year. SentinelOne explores a sale. Protect AI acquires a bug bounty platform. PartnerOne acquires Fidelis cybersecurity assets. Does quantum actually solve any security problems? Cost per record is a terrible stat. The UN Cybercrime Treaty. Who will defend AI? Who will AI help more, attackers or defenders? Finally, we bring you 3 micro interviews from Black Hat. We discuss ransomware economy with Jon Miller, CEO and co-founder of Halcyon. We talk pen test war stories with Snehal Antani, co-founder and CEO of Horizon3.ai. And we talk ransomware groups collaborating with each other with John Shier, field CTO at Sophos. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the trusted browser for security-conscious professionals like you. Its ease of use for IT and security teams and added access controls protect the remote, extended, and hybrid workforce, keeping your entire enterprise safe. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome Enterprise now to learn more and start protecting your enterprise like never before. Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Waffle Day. This is episode 329, recorded on Thursday, August 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, a captain of content, Katie Teitler. How you doing, Katie?
I'm well. How are you? How was your vacation? Are you all refreshed?
Well, I was refreshed, but then I came back to work, and this week I've had a pile of stuff. I've had so many things to get done. Work, not work, every category where I have to do stuff. It's been a busy week. But getting a lot done, though. Very productive week. How about you?
Maybe you can enjoy some delicious waffles at the end of the day to relax.
I like that shirt. Aggregation without aggravation. That's very clever.
Yeah.
Very nice. Also joining us, the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How are you, Sean? How was Black Hat?
It was fun. Black Hat is always, Black Hat and DEF CON in Vegas for Hacker Summer Camp is always quite the adventure. It's wonderful to meet up with friends old and new. And I'm very excited about National Waffle Day. Hopefully Belgian waffles are the waffles that you eat today, because I think nothing quite compares to them. They're pretty fantastic.
What is your favorite waffle topping?
Ooh, waffle topping. I'm just going with maple syrup. It has to be maple syrup.
Just plain pure maple
flavored
syrup.
corn syrup stuff. Get out of my house.
So I will say the best waffles I've ever had, it was in Belgium, in Brussels, naturally. And chocolate sauce on the Belgian waffle there was just absolutely amazing. But here in the U.S., syrup, yes.
Interesting.
Keep it plain, keep it simple, keep it classic.
Exactly.
I make 2 kinds of waffles. One of them is I make the classic Belgian style waffles, which are kind of light and fluffy, really tasty. And then the lot of butter, of course. And the other kind are very heavy. They're made with ricotta cheese, have a lot of protein in them. They're more of a like a full meal. Like you can enjoy them like savory style with like spinach and ham, and like I did scrambled eggs and cheese over top of them one time. But good stuff. Either way, waffles are good.
In the
No,
morning,
I'm
I'm making
hungry.
waffles.
You're making waffles tomorrow?
Well, I'm quoting Donkey from Shrek. He said, "In the morning, I'm making waffles."
Oh, it's been a while.
So
I did not
I'm
catch
gonna
that.
get the kids on making some waffles tonight or tomorrow. That sounds great. Although I am headed out to Blue Team Con tomorrow in Chicago, so looking forward to that. So maybe I'll get some waffles when I get back.
Yeah, I'm actually not able. I was supposed to speak at it, but I'm not able to make Blue Team Con. A little sad about that. Been wanting to get out to that for a while, but they pulled me off the wait list, and I thought I was going to be able to do it, and it's just not going to work out. So kind of bummed about that. Now I'm missing both DEF CON Black Hat and Blue Team Con. Yeah.
Yeah, Blue Team Con is a fantastic conference. If you live in Chicago or are local to the Chicago area, I highly recommend it. It's Saturday and Sunday. I believe there's still tickets available. BlueTeamCon.com. I think it's a really great conference because it focuses on defense and really trying to make things better and improve things. A lot of the talks are focused around that, and certainly red teamers, pen testers, offensive mindsets are welcome. I play both sides, so to speak, so they still invite me and welcome me there. So it's fun.
All right, quick announcement here. You can now find us on Instagram. Follow us for highlight reels, giveaway announcements, and more at SEC Weekly. That's SEC Weekly. All right, now time for our interview. This interview is sponsored by Kolide. Today's topic is device management and trust. We're excited to have Jason Meller, founder and CEO at Kolide. Jason started out working under the legendary Richard Beitlich? I'm not sure how to say his last name. Beitlich?
Yes.
All right. Later, he became the chief security strategist at Mandiant, where he built and implemented key products and services, and also co-founded and served as CEO of ThreatStack, which, if memory serves, I think was acquired a few years back by F5. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. Quite the background. I think if you're going to come up in the security space, you kind of luck out working under somebody like Richard, in an organization like that. Somebody who literally wrote a bunch of the books on network monitoring.
Yeah, it was a lot of luck, but I spent my whole childhood really getting into the security space. Not necessarily for the good guys. I was a bit of a script kiddie. I don't know if you guys remember back in the AOL days, progs and punters and things like that. That's how I learned how to code, was to kind of build that type of stuff. Then, I grew up, matured, and learned that it felt pretty bad to screw up computers, and spent the rest of my life trying to defend them and fix them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common path. Once you learn what you can do with code, some kind of necessity drives it, right? Like for me, I kind of intentionally wanted to teach myself to learn computers. So when I first got broadband in the late '90s, probably from AT&T broadband, 1.5 megs per second. I decided to run my own email. I bought my own domain and not only ran my own website, ended up running websites for friends and family, but ran my own email. I thought, if I can keep my own email server up and running and not hacked, like that'll probably teach me a lot about computers. And it sure did.
No, it was the same way. I think I learned most of my networking from running my own IRC server. I was a node on Downnet for a while. And, got to learn all the fun things that come with running an IRC server, like my first distributed denial of service attack and net splits and things like that, where you have to just kind of figure it out. And, you're 17 years old, 18 years old, and there isn't really a course you can take at that age. So you just sort of ask around, find people who are in the know and learn that way. And that's pretty much how I learned the majority of the skills that I had. And then that got formalized later when I went to college and university. But by the time I had started my career at GE and I met Richard Beitlich, I remember in my interview, he just was quizzing me on ports and what were the common applications that were bound to those ports. And I got them all right. And I think that was like 50% of the interview. But I don't know where you would learn that other than just sort of hard-won experience. So it was fortunate that I had the opportunity to work with him and kind of cut my teeth in a real computer incident response team during a time when GE was under the threat of advanced persistent threat. I mean, we were a Department of Defense contractor. We were building the engines for the Joint Strike Fighter, and it was a critical time in the company, and we got to defend against real attacks that were pretty serious. So it was good. And then from there, I moved on to Mandiant, which was my first foray as, working for a vendor and learning that, hey, all this coding stuff that I learned how to do, I can turn that into a product and sell it to people, and that makes them better, smarter at defending their organization. That's sort of where I got excited about, building things for other people and then selling them, which then led to founding my own company, and now that's where I'm at.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you kind of made me, talking about what default ports for common services. Reminded it being just after DEF CON a couple years ago. I believe it was Hacker Jeopardy. All the gray hairs were dyed a little inside when they heard nobody could answer the question, what port does Telnet run on? I think it was.
Oh no more Telnet, no more. What's the other one that would be? Yeah, probably FTP. No one's probably thinking about that one anymore.
SSH is still popular.
I thought that too, and then we had some just massive breaches at in vulnerabilities in products that are basically glorified FTP servers, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
at a certain point, everything's FTP, right?
Well, no, I mean literally FTP, literal FTP, not metaphorical FTP. But yeah, let's move on here. So. Yeah, so talking about your path, coming into Kolide, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kolide is kind of, I don't want to say had a pivot or a facelift, but kind of like a second iteration of Kolide, no?
Oh yeah, you could totally say it had a pivot and a facelift. That's definitely what happened. When we first started the company, it started off of the big announcement that came out of Facebook. Facebook at the time had just open sourced their OS query agent, which for the folks who may not be familiar, it was the agent that they were running internally on Mac and Linux devices to really get visibility on those platforms. Back when they open sourced this in 2015, there weren't really any commercial vendors who built a reasonable Mac OS or even a Linux agent. They were just paid lip service, and everything was sort of Windows monolithic. But if you think about Facebook, you think about, all right, they have a massive amount of server infrastructure that's all running on Linux, and they have a lot of engineers, and most of them are using MacBooks. So the visibility there just wasn't there in the commercial market. So they decided to build their own thing. And the best thing that they did was they decided to open source it. I was working at Mandiant at the time, and I was just so excited by this development that I immediately started chatting with folks and decided to start a company and then build something interesting on top of this open source agent, which then eventually added Windows support. What we learned, though, in like the first iteration of Kolide is that if you built a great endpoint detection and response product on top of open source software and sold it to enterprises, they expected it to be sort of the discount, like the wish.com version of EDR. So if you were trying to sell something that would normally retail for, 300, 400K, like something equivalent to CrowdStrike or at the time Tanium, they'd be like, oh, this Kolide thing, this is great. It's running on open source. So you guys didn't have to build that part. So we sort of expect that the value of this for us, like we'd like to pay like 10, 20 grand, and we like to have like a lifetime license. So like the business fundamentals didn't really work. And we were effectively building a copycat product on top of the only thing that was really different was the fact that we were using an open source agent, which was exciting, but not necessarily something that generated differentiated value for customers. So we ended up just sort of wiping the slate clean around 2019. And what we did was we decided to pivot towards, all right, what's something novel that we can solve in the endpoint space with this open source agent? What can we do that isn't really something anyone is paying attention to right now? And the ultimate lesson that I learned throughout my career up until this point was I really didn't feel great about how end users were being treated by security teams. This idea of end users are the source of all the problems and the risks. So therefore, we need to contain them. We need to really lock them down. And we want to create this adversarial relationship between the security team and the end users that sort of naturally forms. And I wanted to explore a product that didn't automatically create that. And in fact, did the opposite. It actually caused end users to be a major source of remediation or context that could help the security team learn. What could we do between the security practitioners and the end users if that relationship was really, really good? So the first iteration of a product on that premise that we built was, we just called it Kolide, since we're sort of wiping everything clean. And effectively all it did was the OS query agent would look for things that were wrong on the device, from the very basic things like the device is missing updates to you have an unencrypted SSH key that says AWS USE2 on it or something, and there's no password needed to use it to sign into something, to hey, your GitHub two-factor backup codes are just sitting in your downloads folder. So we would enumerate all of these problems, and then we would message the end user who was the primary owner of that device with a heads up saying, hey, you have all these problems. Here's some step-by-step instructions on how to fix them. And then we even gave them a little button in the Slack client to click that they could click to say that they fixed it. And then we would check it in real time. So we sold that product from 2019 to end of last year, and it did really, really well, but it was always missing this critical point, which is, what about the users who don't listen to the Slack messages? How can we get everybody, 100% of the folks, to actually fix any problems that Kolide enumerated? And that's when we built our Okta integration, which we announced and launched earlier this year. Effectively, what it does is we do the same type of device checking, except now we're doing it inside of your SSO login. So you're going to sign into something, let's say it's like your HR system, like Bamboo HR. So you sign in, you get prompted with Okta, and then you get redirected to Kolide. Kolide checks your device. And if you're missing any major updates or you have any of the problems that I enumerated earlier, your device is not allowed to sign in. Now, of course, we give you, a grace period. You have a warning before you're actually blocked, but eventually you do get blocked if you don't get those things solved, and then you have to fix them. And then when you fix them, you can sign in again. That pivot to that type of model has completely changed the game for us. We are now working with really, really large enterprises. Like, for example, Databricks just became a customer of ours, and they're rolling it out because they're using this as the device trust portion of their entire Zero Trust rollout. And what is great is that we can establish device trust with any device in your infrastructure that's running the agent, and it's not just trusted because it's running the agent, but it also is hitting all of the requirements that you have around updates and any of the other problems or checks that I enumerated earlier. So it's been really great.
Yeah, and you've touched on a bunch of things here, but maybe if we take a step back and start at the beginning, Sean, did you want to ask your question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. So my question is really going from Mandiant to Kolide. Certainly from Mandiant tooling to OS Query is kind of an interesting pivot. I got some experience with OS Query when it came out with customers that were primarily Mac-based. So did you have an aha moment that was the catalyst for Kolide? Did it happen when you were over at Mandiant? Were there, situations or IRs or something like that you were in and like, this is a problem? But what was that sort of like, aha, this should be solved, and I think I can do that?
Yeah. The value of OS Query was obvious to me within the context of Mandiant, because at Mandiant, OS Query solved a problem that Mandiant had not solved with its own endpoint product. And that was, how do you actually take all of this agent capability and create a query language on top of it? And at Mandiant, we had this thing called OpenIOC, and it was this XML-based format where you created all this Boolean logic to write effectively detection rules. And it stunk, like nobody likes to write XML, so there needed to be some kind of like GUI editor on top of it. And it was never quite right, because writing those types of rules in a UI is like, it just never works right. And this aha moment of, why don't we just use a language that's already designed to be sort of a Boolean logic generator like SQL, and then instead of having it query a data file, let's actually have it query the underlying system in real time, but not have it be like a baby version of SQL. It's like actually the SQLite engine running under the hood. And so you can do everything that you can do in a normal relational database, like join tables together, like the processes table and the listening ports table on PID or something like that. To be able to kind of do that was super powerful. And that, to me, as a product person and a user experience person, it was like a no-brainer that this was a major innovation. And that's just beyond. And that the other thing was obvious, like the Mac and Linux support being first class versus afterthoughts. Those two things combined, I think, were game changing to me and made me want to, strike out and do my own thing on top of this.
That sounds really great. And I think one of those things that is interesting in our industry is how a product or a solution that someone comes out with, certainly something open source like OS Query, can lead people in other directions and build solutions and products that are, if not adjacent, then kind of bolt onto it. And certainly OS Query is one of those, because I remember when it came out and the challenges, and I saw a lot of groups start deploying it, figuring out what they sort of data points they could get from it. But the limitations with it were sort of a challenge, as well as the support model, which is it's open source. Go for it. So, right. Did you find that you were able to initially build a company and a solution around this, or was that something that, as you were kind of playing around with OS Query and talking to people, the idea around what this product would actually be solidified? And then the other question I have around this is, how did you end up kind of getting into the situation where you realize that this compliance check as part of authentication or authorization for certainly cloud services is going to be an important thing, and get that Okta integration going?
Yeah. So the first thing that you should know, and this also is answering kind of your earlier question around, what was sort of the context at Mandiant, and would OS Query have been useful in an incident response type of situation for a client? The first thing I learned after starting Kolide is that OS Query actually isn't that great for that type of forensic data collection. So the model that we had at Mandiant back in the day, and I'm sure is similar to the model now, it's like, all right, you want to run your tools and you really want to capture as much forensic information from the device all at once before enough time passes, where a lot of that, a lot of those touch points, the interactions that the attacker had with the system are now dissipated or they're modified. So you really want to do a robust collection as soon as you can, and then really take all that information to another staging area and look at it, forensically later. OS Query was never really designed for that. Number one, OS Query doesn't really have a lot of forensic style OS calls into it. Like, it's running right through all the standard OS API. So on Windows, if the Windows device has rootkit on it, the rootkit, it's maybe hiding files or something, like OS Query will be absolutely fooled by the fact, because it's using just the standard Windows file enumeration APIs. The other thing OS Query didn't really have going for it is any form of tamper protection. So if you were writing malware and you didn't want to be detected by OS Query, you just look for the OS Query D process and then just kill it, and it probably wouldn't come back unless there was like some sort of service relaunching it. But even then, you could probably find that and remove it as well. Versus like the Mandiant endpoint stuff, we were obsessed with, Russia or China. If they devoted significant resources, we could undermine any efforts they would put forth to actually, tamper with the underlying agent. That was just not a consideration. So it became very clear to me that the thing that OS Query was good for was really enumerating a lot of facts about the device, but not necessarily for the purposes of detecting some sort of external evil presence or malware. It was really around what are the facts of the device, so that I can understand, is it in a compliant state or is a setting wrong? So we initially kind of learned what OS Query was good for, and it was really, really just getting a good, reasonable picture of the device. And then from there, the need was, all right, we have a lot of companies out there, they need to pass things like SOC 2, device compliance related to other things like GDPR, like, how are we protecting customer data? Being obsessed with that stuff and really trying to figure out, all right, what can an endpoint agent enumerate about a device that helps us check some boxes for those types of auditors? And then how can we make that process as easy as possible? So that was really kind of the evolution. But then we learned, like, hey, we were enumerating a lot of problems, like the firewall's not on, or the disk isn't encrypted, that we couldn't fix, right? OS Query is a read-only agent. And instead of trying to go down the path of, oh, let's build like a MDM solution, let's build like, the equivalent of Jamf or Kanji, I wanted to explore the idea of actually, let's get end users to fix the problems, because if we can solve that problem of no matter what the compliance issue is, we can actually get an end user to be motivated to fix it on behalf of the security team, then we can solve any problem. And that led us down this path of, all right, we've kind of got 40% of the way away there with the Slack bot, but now we've put it in front of auth, and now there's a consequence if you don't fix the problems. Now we're at 100%. So this is really exciting because now Kolide can do things like detect, hey, you're running a really, really old version of Chrome or something, and there might not be a really easy way to automate the update of Chrome. Like if it's running out of a weird folder or something like that, like things get missed. But with an end user's help, you can solve all sorts of problems that are typically unsolvable. And that's where we've been interested in sort of solving that.
Yeah, so you brought up a couple things. There's and I chuckled a bit. You when you were talking about the history of OS Query, and you mentioned eventually Windows support was added. And it's not something that you often hear with these kinds of tools and products. But MDM has just been super painful for so long. I wonder if you have some insight into that, and I want to better understand like where Kolide fits use case wise and feature wise between like an MDM and a Titanium, which has tons of different modules and stuff like that, and has been around forever. Right. But I understand is also a lot to implement and run as well. So I imagine that there's like some partial competition with different vendors here. So how do you fit into that ecosystem? I don't know. Answer that how you want. Like on the one hand, I want to know why MDM has been so bad, and like where Kolide fits into the market here.
Yeah. So let's start like at first principles. Like I think it's reasonable to want to make sure that when, let's say, Apple releases a rapid security response update, those RSR updates, that you want to install those relatively quickly. I mean, Apple's now taken the time to provision an update because there's a critical, probably in the wild security flaw that, maybe remote code execution. So you don't want to wait 2 months to install those things. So what tools do you have at your disposal as an IT practitioner to make sure that that happens? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, I have an MDM. I'm going to figure out a way to use that to get all of my devices patched, which is what they market it as. Like, hey, you can automate that process. Well, it's not so easy, because in order for an update to be applied to the Mac, you have to reboot it. So if you just force everybody's devices to reboot in the middle of the day, when's the best time to do that? Well, if you try to do it at night, it's not going to work because their laptop's going to be closed. It won't ever restart. And if you try to do it first thing when they come in the morning and they open it up, they'll be annoyed because now they have downtime for like 15 minutes. Yeah. Or if you try to do it in the middle of the day.
If you're a global company, what does night mean? When is night?
Right. So then you're writing scripts to like figure out, okay, what is their local time zone? And it's never quite right. So what is the fallback position of that? Okay, so we can't do automated reboots. That's not going to work. What about just nudging them, notifying them? So there's great open source tools, and some of the MDM products even have their built-in, kind of nag screen, which is, all right, let's start bothering the user and asking them to do this. And if they keep clicking snooze or ignore, or, the notifications get more intense or annoying until they become like ridiculous. And then until maybe they've ignored them for 2 weeks, and then we're going to now fall back to this force reboot position. This stinks. Like, I think that what we know as IT folks and as security practitioners, if a user can defer an action, they will. They don't want to be spending the prime time of their day fixing problems on their device. They want to do their job. So how do we motivate them to do that? Well, the MDM just doesn't have the tools to solve this type of challenge. It doesn't have a consequence that's reasonable and proportional to the problem that it can employ to motivate an end user to do something. So the only thing that it can do is annoy them. Well, that's not effective. What is effective would be something how Kolide solves this problem, which is, all right, we've detected that your device is missing this RSR patch. Your organization is going to give you 2 days to get it done. And if you don't get it done in those 2 days, we're not going to let you sign into stuff anymore. Your device no longer meets the security requirements. Now, you may say, hey, that sounds a lot like the MDM. We're nagging them and annoying them. It's a little bit different because there's a real and proportionate, reasonable consequence. You're just not going to be able to sign in anymore. And they get to pick when they do the update. So they have 2 days to do it. And only they know the right context of their work. Like, I'm about to get lunch. Why don't I do it now? And they will do it because they know if they don't, this automated system will kick in and they won't be able to sign into GitHub anymore. They won't be able to sign into any of their Okta apps anymore. So that tiny change in the psychology of it changes everything. End users suddenly, they're maybe a little annoyed, but they're getting it done. And there isn't like these massive data loss events. Now, that's a very basic example, but you could apply that same style of remediation to any problem on the device. And that's where the power of OS Query really comes in, because you can use this SQL language to define any check that you want and have the end users fix it. It's really incredible.
Well, and I like that. You're being respectful of the user, and you're setting clear expectations and giving them some agency in how they handle this thing and when they handle this thing. Yeah, I'm very big believer in if you treat people like adults, they'll act like it, right?
Right.
And
that means not blind trust. It means really giving them the information, but having there be a consequence if they don't get it done, and have that consequence be reasonable, and not being able to access the sensitive secrets of the organization when you have a device that could be compromised or already is compromised. I think that's a pretty reasonable trade-off, and users get it. And if you explain the why, and then you give them a lot of tools, like Kolide has a little icon that lives in the menu bar or the system tray, and we'll let you know visually, like, is my device about to be blocked soon? Is it already blocked? So you can proactively take care of stuff and not have to be surprised when you sign in. You asked earlier, though, like, where do we fit? We fit more in the identity and access management space now. I don't really consider us, like, all of our customers, they already have CrowdStrike. They already have MDM. They're buying our solution because they really want to make sure that the devices are signing into their stuff are devices that they know and trust, and they meet a minimum standard of security. And that minimum standard isn't just, it's on the MDM, so we're going to presume that it's in good shape. That minimum standard could be anything that they want, including, hey, does this user have like sensitive data with customer information and it's just sitting in their downloads folder, never to be deleted? Does this engineer have a backup of production just sitting on their desktop that's never going to be deleted? Like things like that, where you can use this point of performance, the sign-in process, to induce users to do all sorts of things that they normally wouldn't do on their own, and make it an educational moment as well.
Yeah, Sean, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a follow-up to that. And you sort of answered it, but I was curious about it. MDM becomes this everything to everyone thing. How did you decide what are those things that are most important, or what are the areas you're going to focus on first?
Yeah, well, I think the fundamental limitation of MDM is that it has to use the MDM APIs that are related to the operating system, which fundamentally limits it to this realm of what can you automate. And we wanted to focus on the use cases that aren't served well by pure automation. Now, there's all sorts of things that MDMs do really, really well that we don't want to overlap on. Like, for example, we just hired some new employees at Kolide. When they unwrap their computer out of the cellophane and it connects to Apple's automatic, deployment stuff, they just turn it on and it's already configured to work with our organization. It has all the apps that they need. Everything's configured properly. That's great. MDM is, I think, wonderful for that. And it's coming out in a semi-secure state, right? Like File Vault is enabled, or if it's Windows, it's, BitLocker is correctly set up. The keys are escrowed. Those are all reasonable things that I think an MDM is really good at. MDMs are not good at, though, is the only hammer that they have to fix problems is to just lock them down. Like, oh, we really don't want people to be messing with the firewall. So what is the MDM solution to that? Create a policy that grays it out. But then you have like that developer that needs to turn it off for like 3 seconds because like Docker's not working or something, and they think it's the firewall and they can't turn it off. So then they ask for an exemption out of the MDM, and now they're out of it. They turn off the firewall. That ended up being the problem anyway. And now this device is just out of compliance forever because it's never going to go back into the MDM. Those are the types of things, like the very basic things where you expect users to mess with them. Like the nuances of that are lost to MDM. So we wanted to focus on all the use cases that aren't just as simple as let's automate this because this should be the default. When there's more nuance involved and you have the human being as the central part of it, that's where our solution becomes really, really powerful.
So you talk about the human being being the central part there. You want to talk a bit about why you created Honest.security?
Yes. So I'll try to tell the story really quickly, but when I was at GE at their computer incident response team, we had a moment where we thought we had a legitimate, attack from, China, the PLG. And so we effectively tried not only stop the attack, but we were given permission because they'd actually successfully exfiltrated data to actually go into their, I think it was like an FTP server or something, and then actually log in because we saw the credentials in the clear and then delete it out of their own server. Well, we were high-fiving, like this was exciting, and we thought we were just the best team. Not only we stopped a hack, but we actually prevented data from leaving the organization. We learned later, though, that all of our detection for detecting this type of attack, this was a false positive. In fact, we actually hadn't stopped the APT at all. What we'd stopped is some employee or contractor who was trying to like back up their personal photos, and they just decided to put them all in a RAR archive and encrypt them, and then put them on their FTP server. Like that MO that matched the APT, but it was actually just some person. And what we did is we deleted all their photos off their own private server. It was completely embarrassing. And what I hated about that moment was that we ended up just creating this adversarial relationship with not only that user that was impacted, but with everybody who works there. It's like, oh, what are these guys doing? Can they spy on us? And it just chilled any form of cooperation between us and the end users. And in my opinion, we should be a team. We're dealing with an external threat. Why aren't we working together to do that? So Honest.security, that's the full URL. This was sort of like a manifesto or an expression of what could be done if you can actually repair that relationship and make it productive. What sorts of things are possible, and actually try to create some values and form a guide on how to actually do that for security teams and not make the end users the enemy. Because the context is so important. End users have all sorts of valuable information that would be useful to someone who's looking at alerts in a SIM. Like, why is this URL being used, for the school website? Is this something where, WebC2, that threat actor has this site compromised, but maybe this is a legitimate usage of the site? Like having the end user tell us what they were doing at the time when the alert happened, and them knowing if that's real or not, that's useful context. We never had that, and in my mind, it's something that every security team should have access to in a way that scales.
Right. Yeah, and I had a similar experience. Last time I was on the enterprise, we were implementing, one of the back then big mobile MDMs, and 2 people's phones got accidentally wiped. And it was back in the day where they didn't have synchronization turned on, so they lost a couple years of family photos, and completely lost the trust of the employees after that. After that, everybody basically said, look, you can give me a work phone, but and I'll carry both a work and a personal phone, but you're not touching my personal phone again.
100%. Yeah, and I don't think you should have to require MDM to have a phone sign into stuff. Like an app can be just as good and not have that ability to reach in and just completely destroy the device. So for organizations that want that, you can establish trust with devices that aren't technically yours or under your management if you want. And Kolide works with organizations that are fully embracing MDM, or organizations that have a large contingent of users that are bringing their own devices, whether they're phones or laptops. I think it's a great solution. And it only detects the things that you want it to detect. And we also have invested a lot in privacy so that the end users can understand exactly what checks are running, what the code is under the hood. And so they know what the organization is looking for prior to installing the agent. So if you want to set that up, you can do that. And end users have the ability to see all of that. That was really important to me. And those are all major tenets of honest security.
Yeah. Yeah, so putting on my product strategy hat, what's the future of Kolide here? Do you see a future where because of how budgeting works and current budgets are, the lines are drawn around security budgets? Are you going to have to be a full MDM, or what does that path forward look like for you guys?
Yeah, so right now things are going great, and it's because the need that we are filling is in the zero trust space. So that's an area that has significant budget at most mid-sized to large organizations today. They're learning that, hey, someone's Okta credentials, you can just sign into any cloud app, associated with the organization. That's like a huge 5-alarm fire now, especially off the heels of several hacks last year where if they had a form of zero trust or device trust, those hacks may not have been possible. So the line item that we're associating ourselves with is, listen, you can roll out zero trust and device trust till the cows come home, but if you do it without really great user experience that engages with the end users and tells them why they're blocked, and then more importantly, gives them a path to redemption, you're just going to bury your IT teams with support tickets. And then eventually people are going to get glassy-eyed. They're going to eventually let a system through that shouldn't be let in. And the whole benefit of a zero trust architecture is effectively lost. So we are dealing with organizations that have already rolled this out with a competitor, or they just didn't have a device trust component, and they're learning that they have to roll it back. It's not working out well because end users are completely confused by, sometimes I can log into this app, other times I can't. I don't understand why and how to fix it. That's what we've always been good at. And so if you apply those things that we do really well to the zero trust space, it actually is an enabler of that rollout going really well. And so that's how we're aligning ourselves. So we don't really try to take away from the MDM budget. We think everybody should have an MDM. What we want folks to do is, if you have this idea of, I want to do zero trust in my organization, I want it to go really, really well, you should look at Kolide, and you should look at Kolide doing the device trust piece, because we will get the end users on the same page as the security team and use this opportunity to get them to fix all sorts of things that you're not going to be able to fix with your MDM. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and that's I've even seen organizations where they kind of celebrate those moments, right? Thanks to you guys working with us, through this solution, solutions like Kolide. Here's what we were able to achieve. Before, configuration was all over the place. It was a mess. We didn't have any visibility, and now we can do this stuff. Now everything's aligned, and everybody can sleep better at night. So I think there's an opportunity to share those successes also. And zero trust is hard enough as it is. You don't need a solution just that's going to instantly shoot you in the foot and delay the whole attempt to move to zero trust. I could see easily starting with at the right point, or with the right, or starting at the wrong point, or with the wrong product. You could put a zero trust effort back years.
Oh yeah, some of these organizations, we came in after the botched previous attempt, and what does IT do normally? is they just exempt everybody from the old product. As soon as someone hits an issue, they really don't want to be someone who's stopping someone from doing their job. And so,
exception.
Yeah, everybody's an exception. And then Kolide comes along and everybody's back. And then we have to like repair that relationship. But the way that we've done that is just with really, really good user experience. We want the part of the Kolide is great because we have the agent running at all times. So it's running those checks in the background. That means we don't have to like hold everybody up and have them wait for us to recheck every single thing during sign-in. Like all that work has already been done prior to them even arriving to the sign-in page. We just have to make sure all the checks have run relatively recently, like at least in the last hour or something. And so they can just sail right through. So most people, they probably don't even realize that Kolide is on until they hit their first problem, which is likely going to be an OS update. And they see it, they're like, all right, I get why this is a problem. And then what are they going to do? They're going to go and complain to IT and say, we really just don't want to update our computers. We think that is ridiculous. Because they can't, because if they go back and IT says, well, we had a solution to try to automate this for you, but you didn't like that either. And so it's like, well, I guess I do like this better. This does give me the ability to control when I take the restart, and I am learning a little bit more about the importance of this. So it ends up going well. And then, as you can see, just from my example there, it gets them talking. People are now talking with the security and IT team, and they're talking you're talking about fixing problems, not about why can't I log in? I don't get it. This is your responsibility. Keep my device up to date. I'm on the MDM. It's now these two parties are working together to protect the organization. And that was always sort of the dream. The mission of Kolide is to make those types of conversations happen regularly.
Yeah, putting on my product hat, I was just kind of daydreaming and thinking, it'd be kind of fun if I could give my users credit for a coffee. If I had like some Starbucks budget built into Kolide, and every time I ask them to reboot, I give them some money to go grab a coffee and see how much quicker stuff gets done.
Yeah, we've definitely tried both approaches, the carrot and the stick. The stick being now you can't sign in. That's the one that ends up solving everything. And I think if you try to add too much, like, I feel so bad, I think it creates more. It's like almost like projecting, like, I know this is bad, so I'm going to kind of make you feel like it's bad as well. But users are used to restarting their computer. And if you don't make it a really big deal and it just works and they just have to do the restart every once in a while, it ends up just becoming this background thing that nobody really has to talk about anymore. I like to think about what we're doing. And go ahead. Sorry.
It helps that restarts aren't as disruptive as they used to be. I mean, you restart a Mac today. I mean, most operating systems, maybe not Linux, but certainly Windows and Mac, sometimes you can't even tell that you've rebooted, except if there's an app that starts up automatically that you usually turn off. Like your tabs will be there, whatever documents you had open will be there, Slack will be there. Oftentimes I can't even tell that my system has been rebooted. So a lot of work has been done to make reboots less painful, I think, by operating system vendors.
Yeah, and apps have gotten a lot better at updating as well. Like browsers, evergreen browsers, they just update in line. The only thing that we do there is we just make sure that the browser that's actually running is the more recent one. Because if you just leave it open, you have that little red amber thing that just sits at the top right corner, just getting madder and madder. Well, that's one of the things that we check for. Just, hey, this thing is really angry and red. Why don't we just quickly reboot Chrome really fast? And then it's not a big deal, but you need that little, not just a nudge, but you need a consequence. Otherwise people won't do it.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Well, Jason, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Kolide to learn more. And we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra, Fortra. If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. Cyber threats target digital identities. Do you know who or what is accessing your company's apps, systems, and data? You need to know who's there, who to let in, and who to keep out. And you'll need more than access management to stay secure. You need SailPoint Identity Security. As the leader in identity security, SailPoint can help mature your security resilience while driving efficiencies and compliance for your organization. Start your identity journey with SailPoint's free maturity assessment. Go to securityweekly.com/SailPoint to get your free identity security assessment today. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day invitation-only executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, and now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. If you want to follow along the news stories as we go through them, you can go to securityweekly.com/ESW329. And also, we've got Mr. Tyler Shields with us. How you doing, Tyler?
Greetings, Adrian. Wonderful to see you this week. I haven't been on in a few weeks. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well. I feel like there's a lot of things I haven't had time to do. Went on vacation and just stopped thinking about everything and came back and put together the longest to-do list ever.
That kind of happens these days.
Yeah. All right. So I'm glad you're here today because it looks like this past week is the week that funding is back. I think there were a total of 26 funding events last week, which is a record for this year and beats last year. And we're certainly looking a lot better than we were this time last year.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me. I think they all targeted what would typically be a down news week, coming a couple weeks after Black Hat. You know, everybody had put out all the announcements they were going to put out. Everything. This is typically probably a very silent week, so everybody waited and held the announcements until this week. And holy smokes, did they ever? Have we got a rough total? I mean, it's got to be, if you include the Akamai billion in debt, I mean, we must be pushing Bill 5, Bill 4, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of money being funded out right here this week.
Yeah. So Mike Prevett, I'm going to try and pull up his newsletter, Security Funded, which is where a lot of this stuff comes from. If you're not subscribed to that, go check it out. But he will have a total in that newsletter. I just
yeah, and while you're looking that up too, for those that are not on our website, again, it is episode ESW329. There are numbers as high as 1 billion, but we'll skip that because that's an Akamai debt round.
Post-IPO, yeah.
100 million to resilience, 40 to Horizon 3. There's another 40 something down at the bottom here. It looks like 44 to grip security, which I believe is a SaaS identity risk play. Those seem to be the big ones. Right there alone, you're pushing 1 to 3, 250, 300.
Yep. Yeah, it's I mean, that Akamai one just really throws everything out a bit. But yeah, like $1.1 billion across 14 unique product categories. But I tend to have a few that Mike doesn't have yet, just because when this show comes out, when his newsletter comes out, there's usually a little bit of a difference. And I've got a few newer ones here that hadn't occurred by the time he sent out the newsletter.
And it's always interesting to try to understand the trends on what is getting funded too. It feels like, and I also monitor Mike's security funded list. Again, I'll put an unsolicited, he's not paying me plug to go check it out, but he also bulks them together and says what sub niche markets of cyber are tending to get more funded. And it feels like there's just a lot of hotness going in around identity based cyber right now. It seems to be a pretty hot area. I actually haven't done the math on this funding week, but I imagine that's probably up near the top. SaaS security with the grip stuff probably got a big hit this week as well. So yeah, it's definitely a hot week for funding. I'm surprised that it happened all at once, but like I said, it's probably just a news cycle kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the same category as the company I work for, Valence, except Grip is more of a PLG approach. Like you can go and sign up in just a couple minutes. So definitely has more of a consumer for enterprise type feel to it. But also some common investors. Weil Ventures is an investor in both Grip and Valence. But last week, just looking at not last week, but the week before that was $300 million in funding. That was that was 26. Maybe I mixed that up. Maybe it was week before last that was the biggest one. How many did
big flood last few weeks?
Yeah, 19 this week. So it was week before last. That was 26 funding rounds.
Absolutely crazy.
Yep. Yeah, and a lot of them that you're not going to see here, I kind of cut out. I cut out 3 categories because I feel like they don't really, they're kind of adjacent to security, not really solid security. So the crypto stuff I leave out. There's a lot of it. I don't know enough about that stuff. MSSP stuff, just because of the volume. There's so much MSSP activity. With them being services, I don't know how they get so much funding, but most of the acquisitions and funding rounds are all MDRs, MSSP, have some kind of services component, pen testing even. And the other category is the identity verification. There's a lot going on with identity verification. So basically services that make sure you are you, as we see more and more of these like healthcare and HR related and government services stuff moving to SaaS and remote, where you don't have to actually go into an office, to do some of these things. They want better and better identity verification. So tons of that stuff coming out.
Yeah, I do want to call out one, mostly because I know the guy really well, and he's local here in Raleigh-Durham area. RPO's funding, they do cloud-based disaster recovery effort. They got an $8.2 million round, which in my area, my neck of the woods over here in Raleigh, North Carolina, that's a nice, healthy round. So congratulations to the RPO team. I wanted to call them out directly while I had a minute. The other one that jumps out at me is really interesting is Project Discovery. I don't know how much you know about Project Discovery, but that started out as an open source platform that has been around for a number of years now. It's kind of like a cloud asset management platform in some ways, and they just got a $25 million Series A. So congratulations to them on finally taking that thing to a real Series A that can help them grow as a business.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and for people listening, RPO or watching, I guess, RPO is spelled ARPIO. I'm just saying that because
it didn't even occur to me that people might think it's RPO. It's ARPIO.io is the website.
Yeah. Wow. So to my ears, when you said that, I heard just the letters R, P, and O.
Just like R2D2, same kind of thing, close enough.
Yeah. Let's see here. So, any of the other funding that we want to talk about? Horizon3.ai is an interesting one. In fact, we have a micro interview with them that was pre-recorded at Black Hat that we're going to play after we're done with the news here. And that's an interesting category. That's kind of I've been thinking of it as breach and attack simulation V2. So kind of a reboot of that market where we had like Attack IQ and Safe Breach and stuff like that. Horizon3.ai intends to, and the way I kind of look at this is, your pen test, your red teaming, all that stuff, whether you're doing internally or with somebody external, that's periodic stuff, and it's a sampling of your environment, right? It doesn't touch everything. There's a limited amount of time to do it, for a human to touch things, put hands on things. And this is where Bass and kind of this some of the new players here. There's Prelude is another one, and what is the other one I'm thinking of? Pantera. Does Pantera also fit in this space?
Not sure.
So I think those three.
I saw Pantera at the Black Hat vendor floor, and I went over and asked them what their favorite Pantera song was, and the person looked at me like I was crazy. But I will say one of the coolest thing about the booth is they had a DJ playing music pretty much the whole time. I was very tempted to request Pantera, but 100%. I figured based on the warm reception I got at the table, I probably wouldn't have gotten as much.
The name of your company is like, you have to have an answer to that question,
right? That's what I thought.
I mean, that has to be an intentional pun, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite Pantera song? Sean, I'm going to put you in.
I blanked. I was ready with the one and I blanked. I'll give you one in a minute when it pops back in my head.
Adrian, do you have a favorite?
Walk is always a good one.
I couldn't name a Pantera song if you put a gun to my head.
Yeah,
I've listened to them. Don't like them.
It's very spicy. Cowboys from Hell. That's an Alpha song, though.
Yeah.
Oh, the topics go down on ESW.
It's not our fault. I mean, you put a good pun in the name of your company, and it's going to send us down a rabbit hole.
We're going to rabbit hole.
I saw the other vendor, the Wiz, and every time I saw that or Wiz, I kept thinking about the Wizard of Oz, and I kept looking for the yellow brick road around it.
Right.
That's how my brain
worked. Right? That was a play that was like a derivative off of the Wizard of Oz, right?
Called The Wiz, and it was, I think, originally, at least the movie, I think Michael Jackson was in it.
Fantastic cast.
I'm going to out myself on this one. I've seen that The Wiz play in the theater with my family. So
nice.
Yeah.
So anyway, where I was going with that is I kind of
sorry,
got an animated GIF. Please put that on Discord too. That's a great animated GIF. That's great. We've got it on our Slack on the back channel. But where I was going with that is I kind of see these services as filling in some gaps between the human-based pen testing and red teaming and stuff like that. The stuff like regression testing with security controls. This stuff should be able to do that, I would think, and also testing. My number one use case is testing your ability to actually detect and respond to things. Like, I just did something really nasty in your environment. Did somebody see it? And that's the thing that always got me when I was a pen tester is like, I'd start out being sneaky and then I'd get super noisy and nobody ever noticed any. Like create a new domain admin account, turning off AV on people's workstations, like none of it. Nobody notices any of that stuff. So that always bothered.
You know what I wonder, and again, I haven't done the research on this particular company to know exactly how they do what they do. But we are, and I've said this before many times, we're in a situation now where we have unprecedented access to everything that's going on in your environment via APIs, right? And I'm a firm believer the reason we're seeing so many fundings occur is that people have realized that context and access are massive, which is allowing us to reinvent any cyber market across the board. Identity, detection, pen testing, it's all being augmented with context that it didn't have before. So you can make a smarter breach and attack simulation because it's not just external. It knows everything about your environment, so it can be intelligent about what it attacks, right? So that's just one example. But I feel like we're in a renaissance, a heyday, a kickoff of the next massive wave of what can be done in cyber. And it's all context and API derived. And I think that's what we're seeing on a lot of these companies is them saying, we have access to all this new stuff. We're going to be smarter about how we do it. And hopefully we'll be able to catch people like you, Adrian, when you're doing those types of attacks.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right, Tyler. I think that the context is key. It has been. And, you know, as we've added all these data sources and thrown in all these different systems, I mean, we talked about a few of them in the last segment where we're talking about MDM, we're talking about an identity provider, MDM being mobile device management, which now means everything to everyone, or you know, basically throw the kitchen sink into it. That's the MDM because it has to do so much, right? Manage computers as well as mobile devices like iPhones, Android, which are very different. But we're getting into a situation where we're overloaded with information. And we know that SOCs get too many alerts. They can't triage them all. They can't figure out what's going on. To Adrian's point, he can do things or has done things and no one saw it. Why? Because those didn't raise to the level of alert that actually had an action associated with it, whether that's automated or manual. And so we've needed this additional context. The systems have gotten more complicated. Now we have on-prem and cloud. On-prem directory, cloud directory, Active Directory, Azure AD, Okta, etc. We have on-prem infrastructure, VMware. Now we have cloud infrastructure, Azure, AWS, GCP. We're in a situation where we have so many different systems that we can't discern or differentiate normal activity from malicious activity. We can't discern and identify what the users are doing in the environment because we have an issue identifying and understanding identity across all these systems and those actions. So if we can add a little bit of context to that, if AI can help us a little bit to help better understand, to your point, Tyler, there's disruptions that can be made across the entire industry. And there's certain ones that are ripe for disruption where there hasn't been a great answer, hasn't been a great solution there before. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing AI firms focusing on email and protecting against phishing, because there's enough data points and information and email that are known bad email that we can flood into that model, describe it to the AI, and then also help it kind of figure out what else is coming through. Certainly the same thing when it comes to activity on a network, be it Active Directory or another system.
Yeah, you're 100% right, John. You're exactly making my case. This comes from cloud native, IP accessible, access to not only just raw data, but also access to configuration states, access to communication patterns, access to logs, access to literally every piece of metadata about your environment. And then once you, like just that alone, you can be much smarter. You don't even have to layer AI onto that. And you can be much smarter in how you do detections, how you do preventions, how you automate fixes. All of that can be done way better. We're only setting the groundwork for the AI layer on top of that data set that's not even here yet. That's coming in the next 18 months. And I'm going to actually transition, Adrian. I don't know if you want to go right to this, and if you want to pull me back, feel free. But this really fits into the Palo Alto Q4 earnings call and medium-term update deck that was sent out. You have it listed here as number 25, leaks. But I will say it's not really a leak. It's on their website. Anybody can access it. It may have leaked just before they announced their earnings. So maybe that's why we get labeled leak. But this is just their earnings update.
What should we think? Reports?
Just get rid of leaks. I mean, it's just a trend data. But I read through that thing in detail. Palo Alto Networks over the last X years, let's call it 5, 10 years, whatever you want to call it, they've done a phenomenal job of rolling up a lot of technologies in ways that haven't been rolled up before. And really what they're saying is cloud was the first wave. And if you look into this earnings call document, I highly recommend you read this deck. Cloud was just the first wave. This next wave that Sean and I just articulated, Palo Alto Networks sees it. They recognize it. And they're making plays at massive data lakes. They're making plays at unifying multiple tools and unifying security as a singular passion or a singular component that can be rolled out. Will they be successful? That's a bet you can choose to make or not. But anybody who's interested in kind of the future of where cyber might be going should definitely look at number 25, the Palo Alto Q4 earnings report.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to dig through that, but you're saying the conversation about context and identity here, just all this new information that we have access to?
Yep, they don't directly call it out in that deck, but if you read between the lines thinking about what we just said, you'll understand the future of that, of where Palo Alto is really going to take that system that they're building. And it's going to come down to execution. It always does, right? You can lay the best strategy out on the planet. But you know what? If you look at the history of Palo Alto Networks over the last 10 years, they laid out a strategy to dominate cloud, and they're a top 1, 2, 3 player, whatever you want to call it, top few player in cloud security across the board in multiple markets. I would be not shocked if they couldn't execute in this kind of strategy as well that we're outlining today.
And the report has a lot of pretty graphics, so it's easy to scroll through.
It's super pretty. It's not very dense. It's easy to read. It's Tyler proof.
They know their audience.
They've been really smart about their moves in the last few years, and not just going after the latest and greatest thing, but really looking at the overall portfolio, looking at their partners and acquisitions and who fits where. So they've made some really interesting moves that at first didn't seem obvious, but they're going to be, like you said, they're the top, at least 5, if not less, of security companies, and as opposed to some of the other big players, I think they've really gone after best of breed versus like, hey, let's just be the easiest suite. And that makes a difference too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and more and more, I think that's a consolidation into platform plays is a trend that we've seen also, especially with I think security budgets have still been growing, but it's a lot have kind of stagnated. People have stopped buying stuff, and if they do, it does seem like they're going to be more interested in getting more from a single vendor. Rather than the overhead of having to go to several for that. And, that's pretty typical. It happens in phases, right? Like we see this in the industry where when Next Gen AV came out, the question I'd ask in every single briefing, from SentinelOne and Cylance and CrowdStrike is, when are you going to replace EPP? When are you going to be ready? When are you going to be doing device encryption and like all the other things you need to be able to replace the Symantec and the McAfee. And they laugh and they, talk about the roadmap and stuff like that, but it happened, right? And those companies are now just, not even named that anymore. Like those names are all but gone. And Palo Alto doesn't want to suffer the same fate. All right. And so I was going to mention that number 4, since you guys were talking about identity and context and the importance of that stuff. I mean, that's I literally just put out a blog post today talking about identity and the importance of context and correlating all that stuff together, because what we do is we take all these SaaS apps and we tell you what access people have to what apps they have access to, what privileges they have and all that, and pull it into one place, which is something I've been looking for, especially from an incident response perspective for years. Like, it's so frustrating to start to investigate somebody and, okay, now I have to do 23 SIM queries, to get a picture of what this person looks like, what they're doing, what's a normal day for them. Like, should I be alarmed that they're doing this, or do they do it every Friday at 3 p.m.? But yeah, number 4 is ISPM, which we're starting to see more and more identity security posture management startups called Conductor One.
Star SPM is a thing right now. Literally every space has an SPM. Which, if you think about let's think about the forward-looking implications of that, though. If every market has an SPM, how do they do it, right? They connect via APIs, pull a bunch of data in, look at the security state of the environment, maybe some transactional logs that occur in that environment as well, and all of a sudden they're an SPM, right? XSPM. Massive opportunity for roll up here, and this kind of gets back to the Palo Alto conversation, right? If everything is SPM, then why can't one company pull all SPMs and provide all these value props in a single platform? And that, I think, is kind of the future of what Palo Alto is going to try to pull together. In the short to midterm, like, who knows how long that takes? That takes 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, right? As a long-term vision, there's opportunity for companies just like the ones you've outlined here to nail a market, make a ton of money, and do great for themselves. But at some point, I think all the SPMs either expand into secondary offerings, which include protection, or they get snapped up by a bigger player like a Palo Alto.
Yeah, and protection it's interesting. Considering the last call that we just had, we've seen a lot of efforts to proactively do things just kind of blow up in our faces. We saw a lot of CSPMs that would try to like automatically manage guardrails and stuff like that, and that's a really dangerous thing to do with production systems. And it's inevitable that somebody's gonna configure you can only have 2 containers in the entire environment. Like, how did that number 2 get in there? We usually have 200,000 at any given time. So we've seen a lot of like, okay, the especially talking about identity and context, pulling the user into it and actually literally reaching out and asking the user, hey, is this you? And did you mean to do this? Which banks have already been doing for a while now. Like, and I think that's been really successful with banks in fighting fraud, is actually pulling the user.
You just proved your point, Adrian. You said it says you should have 2, but we have 200,000. So there's no context there, right? There's no understanding of what the needs are of the business, because the business needs need to be.
Yeah,
exactly. The business needs need to be incorporated into what these decisions are in this process, and the security system needs to understand that as well. The security system can't just say, okay, you can only have 2, and that's it.
You are muted, Adrian. You're talking to the void.
Yeah. Sorry.
There he is.
One of my kids had a quick side conversation. All
right. It
wouldn't
be an ESW if we didn't make a mute mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah. I mean, SIM was supposed to do this forever ago, right? And I love that one of the categories we have, like, we perpetually have this, like, SIM replacing. Like, we're not always going to call it SIM, but it's the goal is the same, and we just keep rebuilding. We just keep redesigning and rebuilding.
Speaking of SIM, I've been so disappointed with SIM for the past 10 plus years, because we were supposed to be pulling all this information together into a single source, right? And then the tool itself should be able to go, well, this is an alert, this is an issue, this is an issue. But every time I talked to a SIM vendor or had a customer talk to a SIM vendor, no matter who they were like, okay, well, where are the built-in alerts for the things that we would typically see? And they go, oh, well, you build those because you know your environment. Yeah. I'm like, but the attacks are the same pretty much across across every company. I mean, and one of the news articles here specifically about Lapsus and what they were doing, that's a perfect example of it. Attackers are going to attack. They're going to do the same sort of thing across every environment, because based on what you've seen in pen testing, what I've seen with security assessments, what we do at Trimark, I see the same issues in just about every environment. So if those are issues in every environment, attackers are going to do the same sort of activity in most, if not every environment. We should have events that tie to alerts directly in the SIM and automatically, not just because this company and hundreds of companies have to create those.
That's why MDRs are so huge now, is the lack of, they're not baking in the detection engineering. That's what XDR is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like EDR plus SIM plus NDR, but with somebody doing the detection engineering on the back end and pushing that down to the customer. And that's definitely what MDR is, right? Like, you're outsourcing that detection engineering function, and MDRs are being treated like software startups now, being valued like software startups because they're able to do that at scale, because it looks the same across all of them, because they can benefit from that scale.
Yeah, which is crazy, because now what we're doing is we're going, all right, we have the SIM that we're going to load up primarily with our perimeter devices, firewall, web content filters, VPN logs, if they're even doing that. Maybe you get logs from your directory service system, like your domain controllers, but you almost never get anything beyond that. So you're not getting endpoint logs. You're not getting critical information about where the fight is actually happening on the network. So we're going to end around that and get our EDR, XDR, MDR logs, whatever you want to call it, that's now going to be the SIEM. But those don't show the whole picture of what's going on either. So we're fracturing this environment and trying to figure out, okay, well, we'll approach it from this way and approach it from this way. And I still think that we end up in the situation where the four of us can't see, but we're figuring out that this elephant is actually a hippo, it's a rhino, it's something else, because we don't know what it is because we don't have the whole picture, which goes right back to Tyler's point. We don't have the context about what's going on because we're still fracturing and looking at these things from different perspectives without trying to have a central view of it. And this concept of a single pane of glass we've hit before is a pipe dream. I mean, everyone has a console, or every company has a console, but they don't all integrate, and it's just a mess. Sorry, this is a bit of a downer, but I was in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and the reality is, walking around the Black Hat vendor floor, is no one of these tools is going to solve the problem. It doesn't matter if it's a unified platform like Palo or like SentinelOne, which we have an article on today about them. One system is not going to solve all these problems. And I think, to Katie's point, some companies focus on best of breed. Other companies focus on platform and being able to provide checkboxes across the system, so that way a customer can go with them and be like, okay, we're good because we've checked all these boxes across what Gartner and Forrester says is important. But we're still not solving the problem, and it drives me crazy because we keep missing these key things that are important, which is, what are attackers doing? How do we stop them from doing those things? And I think we keep missing that. Sorry, get off my soapbox now.
You're standing too close to the elephant's leg, right? And it looks like you don't know what it is, right? You don't know what animal that leg is. If you back away and look at the context as a whole, you can start to see it's an elephant, right? But to your point, we're not there yet. We don't have all that context in a way that's consumable, usable, digestible. Why? Because it's a lot of freaking context. And until you actually have some automations in place to consume that context and be smart about using that context, you'll never get there. That's why that's a 5, 7, 10-year roadmap for somebody like Palo Alto to fix. Today, nobody's doing it, right? But I do think that's the future of the direction. Katie, I jumped on you there. Go ahead.
No, that's perfectly fine. I was just going to say, going back to an earlier point about all of this integration, everything is an open API, everything is integrated, and that's great. So we're starting to get all this data from here, from there, whatever systems you want to do. But it's not just taking all of this data. You can't just take all of this data and be like, okay, here's what's going on. Because these systems don't necessarily speak the same language. That, your one system isn't producing data that matches your next system. Software is named various things, various versions have to be correlated. Like, there's so much that goes into that, and so correlation is really, really important. But it's really hard to do well, and most companies who do it don't have that down yet. And part of that is just because there's too much data and nobody's trained on that data well enough yet. Is that coming with machine learning? I'm going to call it machine learning. I don't think it's sentient. But how can we use that data, and how can we get rid of the bad data? Because that's just as important. You have one piece of poison data in there that could throw off the whole model, right? So it's about getting everything together. But a lot of companies, a lot of people making decisions at companies think it's just about getting all of this data, even if that data includes context, because, like you said before, context is about perspective, right? If we're all standing in a round room and somebody comes in a door and we're all at different points, your perspective of how they walked in and what they look like is going to be different. It doesn't mean that the context is wrong. It just means that it has to be normalized in some way. And that's where I think a lot of these tools are falling short. And then on top of that, having findings, having some sort of trending data, in theory, shouldn't be hard, but it is, because we've got so much bad data in the model that it throws these off, and you need so many people looking at the model and tweaking the model constantly that people just get super frustrated, and then they start turning automations off. Like, it's this snowball effect. And the farther in you go, the more people, and security people are skeptical by nature. It's like, oh, I don't trust this. So we're making less progress because every step forward requires a human to go in and say, I'm not so sure. I have to tweak this. I have to do that. And
these platforms oftentimes are platforms of purchased products that are then integrated or blue washed, as it was referred to before when IBM or others have bought a product, kind of put their logo on it, and then said, okay, this is part of the platform. So a lot of these platforms have products that were never meant to be integrated, were not designed that way, and haven't been fully integrated, but they can check off the box across different categories. And so therefore you have what you would need per se. But to Katie's point, they're not talking to each other. You don't have a fully integrated product that really gives you the full picture. You don't get the correlation to Katie's point. You don't get the context to Tyler's point. And then the other problem is we continue to buy products that then need people, but we don't hire people, we fire them. So we end up in a position where we're expecting automation to do things that it can't do yet. Maybe it will, but we don't have the people to actually help make those decisions because they're not around anymore, or the people that the person or persons that have been here the longest, we are no longer here because we didn't value them. And so therefore we don't have that human context around that situation, or the human to actually fix the things that were identified from a pen test or as to Adrian's point, a pen test or a security assessment or something else. So yeah, we continue going through the cycle where we're going to buy more tools, but and maybe AI will fill in some of that context, but we still need the people on the other side of this to understand how all these different systems connect. And identity is one of the biggest issues today, to Adrian's point. If we're not focused on identity, the who's doing what, where, when, why, and we don't have visibility into that, we don't really know what's going on in our environment. Identity is going to continue to be more and more important, especially when we have Active Directory, Okta, Azure AD, now Entra ID, etc.
When there's this the same conversation, but around data also, right? You need a lot of context to understand data. It's like, I remember when it was a PCI QSA. Scanning for credit card data on systems, and you get false positives from Windows System 32 or something like that. You're like, okay, credit card data is not going to be inside a DLL. This is context we can use. We can easily filter this out. And again, like you mentioned before, like a lot of that context is going to be the same, and we should be able to benefit from that at scale. So we'll see if any of these DSPMs are able to figure some of that out, and remove some of that burden off of the product buyers here, so that the product buyers don't have to write all these rules every single time they buy a new product. All right, we got a few hot takes here. The quantum doesn't solve anything for cybersecurity. Essay from Kelly Shortridge I missed back in July, I think is when this came out. But it really tickled me because I had to go and find it. It's funny. Google can't find this old blog post of mine, even though it's posted on Blogspot, which was Google's own blog platform. But I had to actually try and remember the name of my blog and go find it. But I had a similar post I put out April 26, 2012. And I just love how some things never change. But there's still companies out there trying to pitch, quantum computing, as some kind of huge security solution or something like that.
But here's the thing, Adrian, what you're missing is that when you take quantum computing and you build it with the blockchain, and then you sprinkle in AI, then you have a company that's going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in funding.
It's like how every crypto starts. Let me tell you what you're missing.
Exactly. And then for every user account, we can mint an NFT, and then we can ensure that we track that user account and its identity. Done. $100 million company right there.
At least to start with. That's your Series A. But yeah, good stuff. As always, very entertaining writing. And yeah, makes a good point that, hey, like there's a lot of, and there's some real gems in here too. Yeah. So my favorite is, just kind of redirecting us, just like it's easy to get distracted, shiny things and all that. And I love her posts for their ability to redirect to real problems. But this is my favorite part, which I'll read real quickly here. She says, for real, if you want a huge, horrifying existential threat to tackle, the undersea cables that underpin the internet are vulnerable to climate change. Migrating your efforts from technobabble to working on climate change will mean you're no longer a waste of carbon at the very least.
Love it.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. And the point of the article,
warming oceans we're going to screw up undersea cables. That does sound terrifying.
That's brilliant. I mean, the thing that I like about the article is it points out that quantum doesn't solve any of the issues that we have today in cybersecurity, the things that we're dealing with, from phishing to private information release, et cetera. It doesn't solve any of that. Quantum really comes down to computing power, which really focuses on more of an encryption type issue and potential problem. But I don't know that we're there yet.
Which we know because we had a quantum special on this and we talked to the experts, is all theoretical. Like we don't even have error correction in quantum yet. We don't have enough qubits for that. So we've got all these current problems, and yet it's just so much funding and so much focus gets redirected to things that are theoretical and far in the future. Absolutely, we want to solve. We want. And pretty much we're almost there, where we've got algorithms, that can be quantum safe. But yeah, even as far as 2012, there had already been several uncrackable quantum safe encryption pitches out there in 2012 that had been debunked.
Yeah, I was joking about quantum networking probably about the same amount of time, a decade ago, about how, quantum networking would enable you to have the data on your computer before you even ask for it. Problem solved.
Yeah. The other hot take is a cybersecurity data science one from Jay Jacobs, where there's yet another cost of a data breach report that came out. And this is just a post to his LinkedIn where he explains why that's a bad take, that's a bad metric to use to measure this stuff, and for the umpteenth time explains why. So it's a good one there. Interesting essay from Daniel Miesler here, talking about who's going to benefit the most from current and future AI trends, attackers or defenders. Really interesting one from Thinkst here about how default behavior sticks. So Thinkst, they actually went through their products. They have instructions, like if you want to use canary tokens, so these are, if you've got a fake Word doc that you want to get pinged when an attacker opens it, this is one of the things that the Thinkst product does, is it will relay that message to you. But if you want that message to go to your own domain that you come up with, your own kind of secret domain to, you don't want it to be obvious that DNS request is going out to Thinkst's DNS and their name servers, you can set up your own. You can customize it. And their documentation uses a placeholder like documentation does when you have to choose a value for yourself. And they found 40% of their customers were using the default, the some prefix is what that's not what they actually use in their documentation, but that's what they use for the blog post. They just copied and pasted it straight from the documentation, which is exactly the wrong, like you're doing this so that it's not easily guessable as a trap. And you just copied and pasted it right from the instructions. So, pretty instructive for when you put together instructions like this. Like, that's why on all of our broadband modems and stuff like that, the Wi-Fi SSID is automatically generated, and the password for that is automatically generated now, right? Because they knew, we know people aren't going to change them. They're just going to leave it there. It works. Why change it?
Yeah.
So I found that fascinating. Turns out all the Lapsus attackers were indeed teenagers.
Oh,
there's some
that one
through the courts now. Very smart, autistic teenagers, but teenagers.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a great write-up by CISA. It's pretty lengthy, pretty detailed, but some of the interesting insights in it is that the attackers identified administrative passwords documented in a spreadsheet, AWS, Amazon Web Services, access keys stored in Slack, sensitive data stored in collaborative platforms, code repositories, communication channels, processes for accessing source code stored in enterprise knowledge shares, privileged credentials embedded in a PowerShell script stored on a misconfigured network share, credentials from password databases, browser password caches, and keychains. So obviously privileged credentials being stored in things like the browser. And they use the typical credential dumping tools such as Minidump, Impacket, as well as offensive security tools like Cobalt Strike, PowerSploit, Metasploit, and abuse the ntds util.exe utility to dump the ntds DIT, which is the Active Directory database that is the information of all of the users and passwords within Active Directory, or password hashes. They use RustScan and ADFind to look at the environment. They leverage internal communication channels such as Slack to impersonate employees and conduct internal social engineering attacks. One of the interesting things about this is how much Lapsus leveraged social engineering as well as MFA fatigue, where they just kept sending the MFA request over and over again, as well as exploiting lack of security in the process to get MFA set up or even replaced for employees. So this means that the companies that were attacked by Lapsus successfully, especially those that had MFA, didn't have good policies or process around ensuring that when the user reached out to get it reset or changed or added, there weren't good appropriate protections to stop someone from impersonating that user. They also used built-in cloud diagnostics extensions to back up virtual machines and collect logs from systems, used compromised AWS tokens to request and assume permissions of an instance role, and creating temporary credentials for non-existent users with open source cloud management tools. So they were also leveraging the cloud services to then leverage those to also run attacks. It's important to note that about half of the compromises involved exploiting Active Directory. So if you are listening to this now and you have Active Directory, there are tools and ways out there to help protect your Active Directory. Please find them. Please look at your AD. Make sure that you're protecting them. And if you're running Microsoft Exchange on-prem, you should really seriously consider switching to cloud email. Wow. Exchange on-prem is a problem. There are lots of vulnerabilities with it. It is internet connected, and it is very challenging to run securely at this point. Lapsus exploited Exchange servers, such as proxy shell attacks and others.
Wow,
where do you work again? Forget what's the name of the place where you work? I forget the name.
Oh, Trimark Security. Yeah, we do Active Directory security. We actually also published a white paper, a 30-page white paper on how to secure Active Directory more quickly. So you can find that at hub.trimarksecurity.com. as well as a lot of other resources, free resources to look at Active Directory certificate services and get those fixed. Again, we want to make things better, and so we publish this information for free.
That distillation of that 50-page report can be summed up in 2 words: get wrecked. Because that's pretty much what'll happen if you don't fix your stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's humbling, right? You know, it's just teenagers with some time just using tools that were out there and available and techniques that were out there that we all knew about 10 years ago, at least. You know, and the companies they were hitting weren't, you know, water treatment plants and like municipal city governments, and you know, it was freaking Uber and Electronic Arts.
Some of the biggest companies around, which should know better than to have passwords sitting on the network. And also, apparently they were also bringing in and recruiting insiders, paying $20,000 or more for someone working at a telecommunications company in order to do a SIM jacking, which is basically impersonating the SIM card of a known user and their mobile phone number. So basically, because so much MFA depends on text message, they were basically leveraging that to impersonate the user's cell phone in order to get the same message and then be able to MFA in as the user without having to do anything else with the company itself.
Wow. You can almost
it's a pretty good article.
Graphic for that one.
Yeah, and it just shows you that, like, there are issues across every industry. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, Adrian's point, like, local municipal government, they're cash-strapped, resource-constrained. Hospitals, healthcare, small healthcare service companies, doctors' offices, all of these places likely have a system like Active Directory, but don't have staff to manage it or even secure it. They can't afford the products and tools that we're talking about that often cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in order to have a better idea of what their security is doing. And organizations and groups like Lapsus are just wrecking them, to Tyler's point, because this baseline level security is just not there in most environments.
Yeah. Just go to your applications directory and delete Active Directory.
That's one way.
Just delete that directory.
I will say I've had pen testers and red teamers come up to me and complain to me at Vegas a couple weeks ago, saying, yeah, we went up against one of Trimark's customers' Active Directory environments and it was painful. So that feels good. So at least I've got that. I can't help all of these other things, but like I said, we do publish free tools to help those folks.
Always great to get validation. You get feedback like that. So let's see. I think we are, well, I just wanted to mention number 27. You might have to refresh. I added this just as we were starting. There is a new Chrome feature that will alert users now about malicious extensions. So this is something I hear a lot from security leaders. Maybe not a lot, but every now and then somebody asks me, are there any security tools that'll let me know if there are malicious extensions? And there's like one or two. There's almost nothing, which is shocking given how widely Chrome is used and how widely extensions are used. And extensions have certainly been leveraged in attacks. So yeah, this is the ideal thing for Chrome to just build in, some kind of protection, some kind of malicious extension detection and prevention into the browser.
And while this sounds like something that's nice and it's helpful to users, this is actually something that really is a critical security feature. Because when you think about the fact that we're using cloud, how does pretty much everyone manage, connect, and interact with cloud through the web browser? And very often, from my experience, is the admins that are administering their cloud environment are using the same web browser, probably Chrome, as they use to browse Reddit and other things, for example. So these malicious extensions that could be installed by attackers enable them to effectively duplicate or hide what they're doing while they are impersonating that user by stealing that cookie, stealing that token from within that browser, which is a proof of identity for that admin user or even that user to that cloud service. This is happening all the time. So this is an important thing.
And how is Lapsus targeting people? Admins' laptops. Right? like totally going after the admin and all their power directly on their machine, which you got access to the machine, you can install extensions. You can just drop them in the folder and they show up. It might be a little harder than that to deploy. It's been a while since I've messed with it. All right. Number 28, our first squirrel story, first of two. There is now a Hot Ones knockoff, a cybersecurity Hot Ones knockoff called Hot Takes. And I got to meet.
Ashish.
I started playing it. Got to meet. I forget his name. right now. I can't remember his name at RSA. He's actually also IONS faculty, so I met him at the IONS event. And then Caleb Sema, a well-known CISO, is the first episode here. So yeah, it looks like it was really well put together. I watched part of it. You always cringe when somebody tries to do some of these things. Like Tyler knows, you've seen good and bad marketing efforts over the years. There are vendor YouTube channels that only have like 3 or 4 videos on them, and they wisely abandoned their efforts to do things like this. But I thought this was done pretty well.
Yeah, Ashish is amazing, man. He absolutely kills it. I've been following his stuff because I've been in cloud security for a handful of years now, since he started putting stuff out. And he's just a top-notch content creator. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's educational. He's not putting out pure garbage. And to see, first of all, I want to call out Caleb if he hears this. I want to call him out for being a wimp and not eating traditional hot stuff. He refused to eat hot peppers, so they had to.
He did, but he ate a boatload of wasabi. He ate like.
I'm a pepperhead. Peppers hit
that's
different.
Not capsaicin, though. Yeah.
I'm just saying he wimped out by not eating peppers. That's point number 1. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He did rock a hell of a lot of wasabi on this thing, and I just loved watching him cringe and struggle to ask questions. Answer questions. I thought it was fantastic.
And you guys are going to love the second squirrel story. You have to click it.
I did click it when I refreshed earlier when you said you updated it, and that's pretty fantastic. That is quite impressive.
So it's a skin for Reddit that makes Reddit look like Outlook web access. So basically, it looks like you're looking at an inbox, but you're looking at the front page of Reddit.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
It reminds me of the old. Do you remember the old video games where you hit a certain key combination and it would put up like an Excel spreadsheet over the top of it? Mm-hmm. It's exactly what it reminds me of. It's just well played.
Boss mode.
Yes, boss mode. That's right. You'd hit like Shift B or Control B, and the Excel spreadsheet would come up.
It's called MS Outlook Kit. So yeah, go to the show notes. You can click it. But yeah, MS Outlook Kit. We'll find it.
Impressive.
That's fantastic.
All right, great stuff. Thanks so much, Katie, Sean, and Tyler for joining me today. Big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We're not quite done just yet. We do have 3 micro interviews from Black Hat that we're going to play as soon as we wrap here. Have a great weekend, y'all, and see you next week. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phish credentials are useless to attackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is, you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Kolide. Visit securityweekly.com/Kolide to watch a demo today. That's securityweekly.com/KOLIDE.
Good Thursday morning, everyone. Here we are, another day. We are reporting live from Black Hat USA 2023 here at Mandalay Bay. And it's my pleasure to be joined with an old friend, an old colleague actually, John Shier, Field CTO. And we're going to talk about Sophos' latest report, this time on the Royale situation.
That's right.
So welcome, first of all.
Thanks, Bill.
How's your week going?
Yeah, it's going all right. It's typical, hacker summer camp with B-Sides, Black Hat, and DEF CON coming up. So it's a busy week, but always fun to see old friends and talk security.
Yeah. So let's dig in with this new threat.
Yeah.
So let's start by just going through what Sophos has found about the behavior of this and who the biggest targets are,
right,
etc. And we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So at Black Hat, we released the Sophos XOps team released a report based on some MDR investigations that we did, and so our incident response analysts were looking at some cases independently, and they started noticing some interesting correlations. Right. They noticed a bunch of cases that had identical file names. These were scripts, they were batch scripts, but they had identical file names, and then the scripts themselves were also identical. They noticed that the threat actors in these cases were creating usernames with the same username, same passwords, in order to get persistence and escalate privilege. Mm-hmm. And when they were creating 7-zip archives for payload, they were also using the identical passwords. Right. So in and of themselves, these indicators probably don't amount to much. But when you start to stack one on top of another, you start to see these patterns, and you start to see that maybe they're related. So these investigations involved 3 different ransomware groups. So they all occurred earlier this year, and one of them was a Hive ransomware attack. And so we know that Hive is no longer with us, thankfully. And the other one was a Black Basta attack. But what was really interesting is that these indicators also kind of ensnared Royal ransomware in there as well. Now we know that Hive and Black Basta use affiliates, but Royal to this day, as far as most of the threat intelligence is concerned, is a private group that does not use affiliates. So why were they lumped in with a group that, or at least with indicators that was involving ransomware as a service? And that's kind of the question that we started asking ourselves as we were digging in through the research and the investigation.
So you've already answered this question in detail, but I'm going to circle back around because, when it comes to the subject of ransomware, there's a lot of fatigue that goes on. And with that in mind, if you could boil it down to a sentence or two, what you just outlined as the tactics and patterns, talk about why they matter. Why is this important?
If to really boil it down, we could say time to detect, right? And as defenders, the ability to shorten that time to detect then allows you to go into response that much quicker. It buys you time for response, but it also allows you to go into response that much quicker.
Yeah.
If you can detect sooner, if you can detect earlier in the attack chain, then your response playbook can, you can make sure that your the attack itself can be kind of neutralized and neutered before it causes a lot of damage. But then your response playbooks can take over and clean it up as efficiently as possible.
Now, and I have, just for those keeping along, I keep my questions here so I don't forget anything. So
I wish I could keep my answers here.
you could have. We would have let you have your laptop on top. But anyway, here we are. So how do organizations look for these activity clusters that we've just been talking about?
As far as organizations individually, right, we produce this intelligence specifically so that, and you know, a lot of companies that produce reports are giving things like IOCs and all sorts of different indicators for companies to be able to do some of this hunting themselves, right? So that's why we publish them, and we want you to be able to know what some of these attacks look like. The thing that's interesting about what we're calling threat activity clusters, right, is that we're not so much trying to give you attribution, but we're trying to give you a bit of a roadmap of what some of these attacks look like so that you can detect them sooner, right? So if A follows B follows C, you know that D, E, and F are shortly going to happen in your network, right? And so this is what we're trying to do, is we're saying, in this particular case, this set of threat activity indicators, right, A, B, and C, was related to these distinct threat actors. It leads you to attribution down the road potentially, right? Because you know that if the attack runs its course, then it's Royal or it's Lockbit or it's whomever, right? But we're really trying to get people to detect sooner so that we can, again, prevent the most damaging steps of the attacks from occurring, namely the encryption and also some of the data theft that occurs with a lot of these ransomware crews.
And just, this is a bit of a backtrack, but
sure.
It just occurred to me I wanted to ask. Royale, are we definitely looking at the affiliate model?
I don't think we can say with 100% of certainty that they're moving to an affiliate model.
Yeah.
If we just look at the history of that group in context with their ancestry, if you will, right? Grew up at Oriak, a private group, which then spawned off Conti, a ransomware as a service group, which when they split into a whole bunch of different, we know there's some associations between Royal, Black Basta, Karakurt, which is a data extortion group.
That's why
right?
I asked.
So the individuals involved, and in this particular set of attacks, I think it was probably the same individuals that were part of the different programs, right? Of the different ransomware programs. And it could just be that they're buddies with the old Conti / Royal / whatever crews, right? Or it could be that Royal is trialing a model of affiliates. It could be a one-off. It's really hard to tell, and unless we ask the Royal guys themselves, right? But I don't think they tell us.
It's a stay tuned kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a lagging indicator in this case, right?
Yeah. So talk about how Sophos customers can leverage everything Sophos is doing right now on this front with MDR,
right.
with everything from that to endpoint detection, endpoint
right.
protection, whatnot. Talk about the Sophos approach.
Yeah, so our MDR team has the skills, the expertise, and the availability and bandwidth to be able to proactively monitor networks 24/7, 365, right?
Yep.
And if we sort of unpick that a little bit, right? When I talk about skills and expertise, obviously there's a lot of people out there. The Black Hat floor is full of people with the necessary skills to do this stuff, but not every company has those people working for them. It can be expensive to spin up your own SOC, and if your core competency as a business isn't necessarily in IT, right? It takes some investment to get there. So we have those people working for us. We have the experience and expertise, meaning that we see these attacks day in, day out across our 17,000 plus customer base, right? And we're able to make these correlations. We're able to make these inferences and spot patterns within the data because it's such a large data set that an individual company might not be able to do. If you get attacked by Royal, for example, it's the first time you've probably been attacked by Royal. So it's going to take you a little bit of time to sort of get your feet under you and understand what is the typical attack playbook. Whereas we see Royal dozens of times a day, right? We see these guys attempting to breach networks all the time. So we can spot those indicators sooner. And so by partnering with the Sophos team, Sophos MDR, what you're getting is these professionals that are able to spot these signals sooner, alert the customers, proactively neutralize these threats, again, before they get to a stage where things like ransomware get deployed on the network. We also kind of know your strengths and weaknesses, right? We know that within different sectors, there are certain concessions you need to make from a security standpoint. Think about healthcare, right? All the patient care machines.
Right.
You can't really have multi-factor authentication on those machines because people's lives depend on you being able to access the drug cart, the charts, those kinds of things. So let's architect your security a little bit differently, right? And so we know those kinds of things. And finally, we have the sector size and all sorts of visibility that if we see, let's say, a geographical, right? If we see a Spanish language campaign emerge, then we can also look in the rest of our Spanish-speaking constituency and see, is that campaign happening there as well? And if it's not, we can proactively get ahead of it to make sure that it's not successful in, especially if we think about going through the day, right?
Yeah. Am I hearing right? You guys have an Active Directory report coming out?
We have a report, an Active Adversary report.
Did I just say Active Directory?
You sure did.
This is what happens 3 days into Black Hat for me.
I feel you.
I start to say one word when I meant another.
But that slip is interesting because there's some very interesting Active Directory statistics within the report. I don't want to spoil. I don't want to scoop myself, but the criminals are very quickly going after Active Directory once they breach your network after the initial compromise. Yeah. But yeah, so the Active Adversary report is it's a study of all the IR cases that we undertake. So we released one of these back in April for the calendar year of 2022, and I just finished data collection and analysis for the first 6 months of this year. So it's going to be all fresh data and analyses on those cases as well, and we're going to compare and contrast those to some of the previous reports as well.
And we will be here to write about that
Sure
when
will.
the time comes. This has been a pleasure. Before we go, I also want to mention anything more that anyone wants to learn about Sophos, about Security Weekly, please feel free to visit securityweekly.com/SophosBH, as in Black Hat. We'll be back.
Welcome back from Las Vegas. I'm Mandy, here with Jon Miller, CEO and co-founder of Halcyon. How is Vegas treating you so far?
It's very hot, but it's nice in the
Right.
hotel.
It's true. I know
Yeah.
we get all the air conditioning all the time.
Yeah,
It makes
great-
it pleasant.
Great conference, though. A lot of really interesting people here this year.
Really? Feeling a lot of good traction and getting to talk with people?
Yep. Lots of customers, meet new people. Overall, this is my 26th year in a row coming
it
out.
really?
It was DEF CON and before Black
Right.
Hat started, but yeah,
Right.
a lot of years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that you have a lot of people excited to speak with you in Halcyon because you focus on ransomware.
Yeah, it's kind of the gaping head wound of our industry right now, right?
Sure.
And there are lots of companies that want to talk about it and how their technology has some portion that's applicable to ransomware. But Halcyon was really the first company to focus on ransomware specifically as a threat, the threat actors, and then build a solution that isn't trying to do everything, just mitigate that risk of ransomware to enterprises.
Oh man, and giving a little bit of control back to the practitioners that are faced with it and being inundated with it in the last few years.
Well, and the fact that you have an attacker essentially that has more resources than any other attacker before. These groups are bringing in billions of dollars of revenue, and their business, right? So as long as the cash is flowing in, they can reinvest that in new techniques, zero-day vulnerabilities, stuff like that make them so much more not only dangerous but capable than the majority of the attackers people have dealt with in the last 20, 25 years in the industry.
So interesting, because the entry point to being able to actually pull off some really big operations it's so much lower than what it used to be.
Yeah, well, automation has really come in, right? So, 20 years ago, if you wanted to carry out an attack like this, you had to build everything yourself, step by step.
Sure.
And it worked when it was a task that was big enough for a single person or small group. But now, as security has evolved, It takes larger or more sophisticated teams, and it's really kind of changed the paradigm where they now have automation where the amount of destruction essentially they can deliver, the skill set to deliver it is not only lower than it's ever been, it keeps getting lower, right? They keep making it easier, they keep making it more available, and ultimately we're all the ones suffering.
Absolutely. And on that, so baseline question, is ransomware as a problem still growing?
I mean, ransomware as a problem is growing faster than any other problem I've ever seen before.
Fully agree.
And,
yes.
And it's funny because running a ransomware company, especially during COVID, there was a lot of chatter that ransomware was going down, right? Payments were going down. And essentially what happened is, legislation was passed and people stopped talking about it. Okay. And so there was this false lull in the industry that like, oh, this problem's getting better, where in reality it was getting worse and worse. It's just people weren't as free to talk about it as they were before.
And do you feel like that kind of correlated with the ransomware as a service providers taking that time to pull back and really get more organized?
I mean, so each ransomware group is kind of different, right? And they'll have, capabilities, they'll run campaigns, sometimes they'll stop, retool, and then launch new campaigns. But I think really what made everyone feel there was a lull is a lack of visibility, right? It's really hard to see what's going on in other people's networks, especially if they don't want to share that information with you. And now that the ransomware groups are going more into extortion and double extortion, and trying to kind of defame brands, right? It's just you're seeing more and more of a pullback and people trying to deal with it kind of internally or with their insurance companies, and it's not necessarily getting the public attention that it once did, unless it's something like HOP where they're just going hog wild.
And a personal question, do you feel like there is any more shame around why people hold back on that they are a victim of ransomware versus other types of breaches or issues?
So that's actually a really interesting question, right? Because you have different maturity levels. The different ransomware groups normally target an industry and companies of similar size and composition, right? So you'll have groups like Lockbit that target big companies. Right?
And will you list some of the biggest ransomware as a service organizations that you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, Lockbit, Clop. I mean, we've been dealing with Akira, Phobos a lot, Royal. I mean, there's just so many of them, right? Like we could be here all afternoon just listing off names. The interesting thing is when it comes to capabilities, the really advanced groups like Lockbit, when you compare their capability to a less advanced group, right, that is going after SMBs and are asking for ransoms in tens of thousands of dollars instead of millions. Essentially, the tech is still very, very similar, right? It's more the maturation of the organization, right? Like, for the first time, these aren't individual criminal actors. These are companies, right? With CEOs and employees, and people have roles.
Yes.
It's a completely different paradigm than we've really dealt with before in the cyber industry.
Absolutely. And in that, I feel like when I was doing research and you're learning more about what's going on with ransomware, really understanding that ransomware as a service was grabbing such a viable foothold as an organizational model for people to continue to be successful in the nefarious acts. It blows my mind.
It's a channel sales model, right?
Yes.
I've built the software, you go out and sell the software, I take a piece, you take a piece, right? And it gives them that scale, right? They can scale much wider than what they can do as a lone group. And then those affiliates, right, the ones where you're not necessarily part of Lockbit or Akira, but you join them and they give you the tools to use,
Right.
you end up as a group where, you know, you have multiple different ransomwares you can throw. Like I was talking to a customer this week where they were under a ransomware attack, and the attackers couldn't get the ransomware to run.
Mm-hmm.
So mid-attack, they pivoted to another piece of ransomware. Just a completely different group. It was
Okay.
the same guys because they bought, you know, access from a broker, and they were in multiple affiliate networks. But it really builds a business that sets them up to win, especially with the fact that there's no consequence, right? You know, these people that are doing it aren't hiding. I forget the guy's name, but it's one of the big ransomware group leaders. The guy in Russia, he has a Lamborghini with the license plate "Thief" is his personalized license plate, and there's videos of him doing donuts around the police in his Lamborghini because
There's nothing.
he's untouchable, right? He's paid off the right people. He's above the law, and he's an internet personality for it.
So in that, I feel like a lot of times with the ransomware groups, it's a modern iteration of being part of organized crime. I mean, it's that
Yeah, it's
whole...
extortion.
It's
Yeah.
extortion,
Extortion
and
as a business.
it's sexy, it's interesting, because it's like being part of the mob, but you have so many more layers of protection.
So these people do stuff that would make the mafia vomit, right? Never and maybe this is just my background from watching mafia movies. Never would the mafia attack civilians. Never would they attack a hospital
There's
and
an honor
kill.
code. There's a respect.
Yeah.
Right.
There's, you know, they're trying to do business. These people have no ethical compass whatsoever, right? Like it's all about profit and finding the most vulnerable and exploiting that, which is, you know, sad that there's nothing socially or legally that's really countering that. It's just continuing to grow and grow unchecked.
Wow. I mean, so you're answering all this, like, why is it effective?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of it comes down to capability, right? The ransomware shares more similarities with nation state APT level malware than anything else, right? The majority of these people do have ties to the Russian government and have worked on Russian government, you know, cyber offensive operations. And so they have those techniques, right, that are essentially used to only be reserved for governments hacking governments, right? And now you're seeing those super sophisticated techniques just dovetailing straight into cybercrime, right? And the majority of the industry, the majority of our tech isn't really built to protect against the threat of tomorrow.
True.
It's built to protect against the threat
What's
of
already
yesterday.
noted, yeah.
Yeah, right. What we've already been burned with. And it's really easy for attackers essentially to exploit that. If you're willing to go to the higher fruit on the tree, they're bigger and juicier because nobody's ever picked them.
Wow. And so how has Halcyon positioned itself to help security practitioners?
Yeah, well, the key thing is, for the first time ever, we looked at the actual attackers. We didn't want to be the security product that solved every issue, right? And so we took a look at those 300 ransomware groups, took apart all of their software and said, what are their vulnerabilities, right? What is it in their software that we can do to make it incompatible, right? Make it not work? What can we do to offset the catastrophic risk that comes after they go in and encrypt all of your machines? And so by focusing specifically on that threat group and their tactics, we've been able to build something that's not only, you know, more effective at stopping the specific class of threat. I'm not going to say that we stop everything, but we do better than everyone else at not only stopping ransomware, but we're the first product ever to offer resiliency against it, right? So
That's comforting.
if your entire stack fails, if Halcyon fails you, and your machines are encrypted, and you're a retailer or a manufacturer or a hospital, the Halcyon agent itself recovers that endpoint in minutes, right?
Wow.
So we actually capture the encryption keys that they use to encrypt the files, and then our agent just reaches out and uses those to decrypt everything and then restore the machine to a pristine state.
Oh my goodness. Well, then I hope definitely that you get more reach and into industrial control systems for sure.
Oh yeah, we're working a lot. I mean, the industries that are really affected right now that we're working with the most are, the utilities, the control systems, right? Healthcare, manufacturing, retail, and then education, right? Like it's one of those no ethical compass type of things, right?
Correct.
They have, schools don't normally have the same level of maturity as an enterprise. And so you have whole groups that are just going in there and exploiting it, right? I mean, the LA Unified School District is a huge example. I mean, the Costa Rican government went down, right? Like, their hacks and their impact just are going to continue to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Now, do you feel that that is a challenge for security practitioners and those of us who really enjoy securing and trying to do better for the world?
Yeah.
That we don't even have that mindset of going to that depraved level, the depravity of I'm going to attack the things that are critical for life.
I feel like the security industry has been great over the last 20 years at theorizing those possibilities, right? Security was really sold on the fear of something bad could happen, right? And now what we're seeing is bad things are actually happening.
This is happening.
And they're pushing, I think of it like a wave, to be honest, where attackers build new techniques, the defensive controls come in, those techniques stop working, the threat goes down until they build a new one, and you've got a new wave, and so on and so on. And what we're seeing now, because these guys have so much money and so much resources, and it means it, those waves are getting closer and closer together to the point where they're coming up with a new technique, and before somebody can necessarily come in and block it, there's a new one and a new one. Right? So the game of cat and mouse is getting more kind of aggressive and fast-paced than it's ever been before in the industry.
Absolutely. So a very quick summary. With Halcyon being at that edge of constantly trying to help stem the impact that ransomware is having constantly.
Yeah.
What is a key takeaway that you would like our audience to have, especially about effectively stopping?
Yeah, I think that, the industry started off with protection as the message. We're going to protect you. And then about 10 years ago, they decided that you can't protect everything, right? So the theory of EDR came in, detect and respond. That paradigm doesn't necessarily work anymore. It works in a lot of cases, but it doesn't work in all of these ransomware scenarios. And that's really what we tried to address with Halcyon, right? Coming in and building a platform that's extendable, against this threat, but offering resiliency for the first time in an endpoint, where if we fail, you're not destroyed, right? You're not losing millions of dollars of business every hour.
Right.
It's something that you recover from, you respond to, but we just eliminate that catastrophic business impact.
So in the event that it happens, it sounds like Halcyon is providing kind of a silver lining that at least there's something to go back to.
We'll get you back, and we'll get you back so quick that it doesn't impact your business. If you're a retailer and your POS system gets ransomware, we can actually recover that so quickly that your customer is not going to walk out of the store, right? Which completely changes that impact and takes a lot of the weight out. The newest feature that we're actually beta testing with customers right now is what we call ransomware DLP, right? So it's protection against the data exfiltration that these guys do. So before they actually ransom the machines, they'll come in, steal the data, and that's how you get the double extortion, right?
I was going to say, so that helps protect against the double extortion. So
yeah. So it's, we're building, I don't want to say slowly, but at a medium pace, right? We're building, think of it like concentric circles of protection out from the the business risk impact of ransomware.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us, John.
Thanks for the time.
And for everyone in our audience, please look at securityweekly.com/HalcyonBH to get more information. And from Vegas, I'm Mandy with Security Weekly. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Hey, welcome back to Black Hat USA 2023 here in Las Vegas, day 2. We're all running on fumes right now after a night of parties, but I'm excited to be sitting here with Snehal Antani. He's this Antani, I got that mostly out, CEO and co-founder of a company called Horizon3.ai. We actually got a chance to meet a little bit last night and talk about what we were going to talk about today, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion. Welcome, Snehal.
Thanks. At this point at Black Hat, I'm mostly full of bourbon and bad decisions, so see how the rest of the day goes.
Well, it might have been a bad decision to come on here, and we're going to talk about pen testing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you doing in the world of pen testing?
So kind of my background, I grew up on the defensive side, solutions architecture, enterprise architect, CIO, and in all of my jobs, I had no idea I was secure until the bad guy showed up. And I needed to verify my security posture and articulate we were secure to our bosses. And pen testing was super important as a way to verify, but I couldn't sit around and wait 18 weeks for somebody to show up, get a report, show how bad we are, and then disappear until next year. And so the challenge in pen testing is, how do we continuously identify our exploitable attack surface? How do we continuously pen test? How do we focus on the problems that are actually important to fix because they can lead to a compromise? And then how do I quickly fix and retest so I can know for sure that I've fixed it? And so I think that in pen testing, what's really changing is the frequency of pen testing should be equal to or greater than the frequency of your change. So for every patch Tuesday, there should be a pen test Wednesday and beyond. And so if we take that as kind of the North Star, how on earth do we get there?
Interesting. As you learned last night, I used to do pen testing. Our audience kind of knows that pen testing is a pet topic of mine. And one of my frustrations when I used to do pen testing, and I stopped doing it almost 20 years ago, was doing the every annual or every 6-month pen test and giving them a real good report, telling them what was wrong, coming back 6 months, a year later, and they hadn't done anything about it. So it's interesting that you're seeing the same problem, but from a slightly different angle. What's your take on how to fix that? How to address that?
I think you've got a few things. One is what is the compelling reason to run more frequent pen tests? Let's just start there for a moment.
Well, let's start with, give us for the purposes of our conversation, what do you call a pen test?
So if you kind of keep it real simple, can a specific technical objective be achieved, like domain compromise, host compromise, or so on, that can lead to a compromise of your uptime, compromise of your information, or a compromise of your access?
So a pen test involves some sort of an objective or goal.
Right, so you have to start with what are the objectives or goals that can be achieved, and how do those objectives and goals matter from a risk standpoint for the business. And then once you understand the objectives or goals, what are what is the exhaustive list of ways an attacker could have gotten there?
Right.
And I think the important word there is exhaustive, because the other issue of pen test is, if you've got 100,000 hosts, you can only afford to test maybe a small slice of it.
Right.
And so you're going to get a real narrow slice, but think of all of the dark aspects of the infrastructure you haven't tested. So it's not just to achieve a goal once and ring the bell, it's all of the exhaustive attack paths that lead to that particular goal you're trying to achieve.
And I'm sure you've never heard, we had to patch all of them?
Yeah, that's the other thing. And the other part is, the big evolution here is attackers don't hack in with CVEs anymore. They log in with credentials that they've harvested. And your credential attack surface has grown significantly, made worse by open source intelligence, password reuse, and other techniques like that can lead to compromise in ways that most tools are not tuned to detect.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I was doing it, cracking passwords was a thing, because they were in world readable files, they were in the memory of the systems. It was back in the Unix days. So if you could get something to crash and create a core dump, it was all there. Yeah, so it was very simple to run a crack program. But I was talking to some of my pen test buddies in the last couple months, and I'm like, do you actually do password cracking anymore? And they're like, once in a long while. But yeah, there's other ways to harvest the credentials that are equally effective. And why do the one thing if something's easier for you?
Well, here's an example. So HP ILO, well, we were a big HP storage company when I was in my previous jobs. HP ILO is basically this virtual appliance used to manage, hardware. Difficult to monitor because it's a custom OS. You're not installing traditional agents on it, and difficult to patch because it's just one of those components that people don't patch very regularly.
Gotcha.
So in one of our pen tests, get code execution on ILO. It stores all of its credentials in clear text in memory. So all you had to do was dump that particular process. You've got all these clear text credentials, many of which are service accounts.
Right.
And then from there, you can snowball that into adjacent machines and compromise.
Right.
And it's Dell iDRACs are the same way, HP ILOs are the same way. And attackers know this. There are blind spots in your environment. Target the blind spots. It's an easy way to get creds. And once you've got creds, you can do all sorts of things with it.
Very much the way it used to be. So it's good to know that the methodology continues. There is a way to do a pen test. There's a way to emulate the attack strategy, and the attackers are going to do what they do, right? So tell me a little bit about Horizon 3.ai.
Yeah, so with Horizon 3, our roots came from our time serving within the special operations community. So I'd left Splunk as CTO, joined the special operations community, and cybersecurity was part of my portfolio amongst other things. And the challenge is I couldn't articulate our security posture accurately. And so we had red teams come in, and they showed up, punched us in the face, showed our holes. The report looked very similar to last year's report, and then they disappeared. And then after we fixed those issues, I said, hey guys, can you come back and retest to make sure we fixed them? And the firm laughed at us, like, no, there's an 18-month wait. We'll come back and see you at the end of next year. I said, well, this is silly. The key part of pen testing isn't finding the problems. It's quickly fixing and retesting to make sure that they've been remediated.
Right.
And how do we accelerate this find, fix, verify cycle? The other big leap of faith was in infrastructure pen testing. That was my biggest attack surface. That's what I was worried about. Custom applications, important, but I can mitigate that through SAST, DAST, and other types of techniques on custom code. But infrastructure is where my biggest blind spot was. And the more I looked at infrastructure pen testing, it was clearly a graph problem, which is, attackers think in graphs, defenders think in lists. So if you look at kind of the offensive side of the house, how do you do recon enumeration, organize that data into a knowledge graph, and then from there, if you know you've got well-defined goals, domain admin or so on, there are specific waypoints along the way that will increase the likelihood of achieving that goal.
Right.
So we took this leap of faith as we left the Special Operations Committee to start Horizon 3 of can we invent this idea of autonomous pen testing? So point, click, and digitally shoot, primarily focus on internal infrastructure tests, and being able to exhaustively identify ways to achieve these goals.
So the hair stood up on my neck a little bit just now because, being an old-time pen tester that firmly believed that a pen test isn't a pen test unless it's manual and it's a person with a brain that's figuring out and connecting, like you're saying, the graph.
Yeah.
What's connected and where do things work and how am I getting here? It might be any circuitous route. I understand the need for automation in our modern age, but convince me that it's okay, or is there still a brain behind it, or what is it that still makes it a pen test?
So let's break that into in a couple of pieces. The first is that humans are super gifted at finding logic flaws in custom applications.
Right.
Really hard to solve that with algorithms. And we're naturally gifted as humans to find that. And so humans need to be the scalpel. They need to focus on those custom applications, the really obtuse or kind of nuanced ways to compromise. But there's a whole bunch of tactics where algorithms are good enough or often superior at scale. Mastering the art of running responder, grabbing NTLM hashes, cracking those hashes and reusing them, password spraying or so on, that's not going to put you on stage at DEF CON. Like, how do you focus as a human on the things that are really pushing the bar?
Right.
Recognizing that autonomous systems can actually solve a lot of the problems. Once again, especially at scale. That's kind of number one. Number two, though, is the difference between automated and autonomous. I actually believe automated is impossible in pen testing, because think of when IBM played Kasparov in chess. IBM didn't hard code 40 million chess games. They looked at every piece on the board to determine the next best action. Trying to automate every possible permutation of a pen test is an impossible task.
Right.
There's why there's a whole graveyard of breach and attack simulation companies that tried to automate in hard code. It just doesn't work. But when you think back the chess analogy, just like in chess, there are well-defined opens. Open up to get the bishop, in the center of the board with the rook and so on. With the knight and so on. There's well-defined closes, roll up the king using your rooks, but the middle of the game is completely dynamic. So similarly in pen testing, there are well-defined opening moves. There's well-defined finishing moves, but the middle is dynamic, and it's much more about next best action style algorithms. So this was our leap of faith. Said 3.5 years ago, is like, is this even possible? And in that time, we've run 26,000 pen tests, all against production systems, no humans involved, IT admin point clicking and digitally shooting to hack themselves. When we first did it, it took, I think, 20 minutes to get a domain compromise. Still super fast.
Right.
Last year, the fastest time was 7 minutes and 19 seconds. This year, so far, it's been 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And
so there's improvement.
But the thing is, that's excluding all the single shot.
Gotcha.
Like, honestly, anyone can exploit it like a zero logon server and or probably get in there. These are legitimately chaining, 3 or more issues across 3 or more machines, none of which are CVEs. So think of credential stuff, compromise, a misconfig.
We used to
JMX
just
server.
call them techniques. I mean, people would want to know, what are your tools?
Yeah.
Exploits is what we used to call them. And
Yeah.
most of what we do is just look at what's there and kind of weasel our way through.
Exactly. And so, once again, there are aspects of the problem that are actually better solved by algorithms, especially in large environments.
Right.
But there is absolutely, I do not see a world where humans are not involved in the high-end stuff. What I do see, though, is the human element is going to require significant expertise. So, it's going to be even harder to find the really high-skilled humans because it's going to take even more expertise to differentiate yourself.
So you have something, you're selling it. It's a service. It's a product. It's
a SaaS company,
Okay.
SaaS service, so annual subscription based on the size of your environment. You can run as many pen tests as you want. Our customers shift from 1 or 2 pen tests a year to 40 or 50 pen tests a month. Every time they do a major
Are
change.
they the human element, or do you have human
just-
elements available?
So there's no human elements. They are literally pointing, clicking, and shooting.
Okay.
And then they are looking at the results, and within the results, it's click here if you want to open a ticket or drive an action or take some sort of remediation step.
Okay. So my day job is PCI. I'm a QSA, and one of the PCI requirements is for a pen test, but one of the sub-requirements is make sure it's performed by a qualified person.
Yeah.
And ironically, and I think they've fixed it in version 4 that's coming out, you only have to vet the qualifications if it's an internal person. There's nothing about who did you hire as a third party to do it. Maybe that's your out. But given that somebody is pushing the button, pointing and clicking internally, how do you answer the question of qualification?
Yeah, so there's a couple of parts. One is for PCI and PCI DSS. A large part of our go-to-market is through our channel partners. That one, there's no way around a qualified human. I'm actually, I was a CIO at a large bank, super annoyed that it isn't explicitly like the qualifications that are required, because you got a whole lot of riffraff out there, that really do mediocre vuln scans and a little bit of Nmap, which agitated me as a customer.
Mess us with a cover page.
Right.
Come on now.
So let's break up the trigger for running a pen test. In that case, for PCI DSS, because it requires a human, you should have a human go off and actually be involved. And we actually offer that specifically for PCI DSS. But for SOC 2, DORA, CMMC, and so on, that's not the requirement.
Okay.
It doesn't actually say that. The other part too, though, is most of our customers, while they're answering compliance questions, run us to proactively secure their environment, improve their security posture to their board and their leadership. So PCI DSS is not the compelling driver to run pen tests. It is a step along the way. The compelling driver is truly proactively reducing your exploitable attack surface.
Great. Well, and ironically, in PCI, the design of the pen test is to demonstrate how well all your security program is working. It's just not ever done that way because somebody forgot that part of the message. Man, we could be talking about pen testing for hours, and we should. Usually, and particularly at a bar with brown liquor.
Yeah, absolutely.
But unfortunately, our time is winding down here. But it's been great meeting you. Definitely want to keep talking. We haven't even talked about the special operations connection we have. But that's going to wrap us up for this session. If you want to learn more about Horizon 3, go to securityweekly.com/Horizon3AIBH. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
All right.
Snehal.
Thank you.